Issue 149. We start out seeing some people in a desert village of Shanazar, looking up at the sky, with one of them unhappy about seeing another one. Sonic shows up in front of them and says that he's shrunk himself so small, off-screen with Neck's backpack I guess, that he's entered a whole universe smaller than an atom. That doesn't make any sense. And we saw Grimer flying around atoms. Not to mention Slimer and Fang. But now all of a sudden it's a normal universe but smaller? The civilians are afraid of Sonic and unhappy because the only people they've met from the world beyond are evil people like Eggman. And probably Fang. That's gotta be why he survived being shrunk into smaller than Atom. After Sonic learns that the civilians had seen Grimer and Fang earlier, he explains everything to them, including explaining that he had grabbed Fang's backpack away before he could shrink himself. One of the civilians arbitrarily doesn't believe him and assumes he's fucking lying when they live in a magic-filled fantasy universe, and the John Fine idiot just met Grimer and Fang, who just showed up with shrinking devices and built of their own. So why the fuck doesn't he believe him? I could understand sticking the guards on him just in case he really is with Grimer, but not disbelieving him entirely. So this is totally unnecessary. And apparently Eggman warned the people of Not Shamar about Sonic, turning them all against him when he's just trying to stop Grimer from reviving Robotnik. Sonic gets threatened by someone who only looks like an old man because the power within him damaged his body. He summons what looks like a green genie who zaps Sonic unconscious and conveniently wakes up right in front of Grimer and Fang, who he'd wanted to find. With them all in the palace dungeon, Grimer explains that the Grand Vizier wants to see them, as he's also from the world beyond, and it turns out he's Robotnik. This whole "there's a normal universe with food and water around when you shrink yourself to an atom" concept is so stupid and out of left field. It's the lamest excuse for Eggman and Fang not dying of starvation ever. When Grimer expresses hope that Eggman will be happy to see his faithful servant again, I immediately assumed that he wouldn't be. The comic should really stop doing that. To everyone's surprise, what they see instead is Kintobor, who says happily, "Sonic, my boy, this is amazing! What are you doing here?" Actually, that makes a lot of sense. He shrunk because he was drained of his emerald power, so what happened was Eggman was formed in the first place because of emerald power combining with all the world's evil going into him. So when the emerald power was drained of Eggman's body completely, he returned to his normal mortal self. Not sure why he shrank, since he wasn't hit by Fang's shrinking device. He should have just returned to normal. Sonic heartwarmingly smiles as Kintobor puts his hand on his shoulder, and he tells the guards to take Grimer and Fang back into the dungeon, saying that Sonic and him are old friends who have a lot of catching up to do. So, how? Is the Kintobor AI going to be very confused with this? I thought he was Eggman's original mind, separate from him into ring form, so Eggman should have had an original mind in him left to be returned to. In the next story, when Amy and Techno are warped to Earth in prehistoric times, because fuck giving them a new other dimension, reality ensues as a civilian runs away thinking they're demons, and a dumb burly man threatens them, calling himself Hercules. He then says he'll fight them to the death in just a minute, which isn't a smart way to behave around what he thinks are demons. You'd think he'd do it right away. Strangely, Amy says, "We're not demons, we're female." Could they be female too? Whatever. Then the man is sexist and tells Amy to get herself to a kitchen and cook him a meal, calling himself a hero. Techno explains to Amy who Hercules is in the Greek legends, which I guess her all-knowing scanner knows about in a time period without the internet. You know, the Ring of Eternity could have used his omniscience to tell them this more naturally. He could have used his omniscience to tell them everything about what they need to know about the other dimensions. They don't need Techno's scanner. But anyways, I was assuming that Hercules wasn't really Hercules and just some stupid pretender with his name because of how pathetic he's being. But apparently he's supposed to be Hercules, and that offends me. And he even talks about his father Zeus not letting him gain his place with the Olympians. I'm really glad Zeus is confirmed to exist for Earth, better than Christian mythology, but this is surprising in a Sonic comic. Amy says that maybe his father is doing it because he's not exactly acting like a god. How would she know what gods are like? She sounds like she's just generalizing them. Hercules continues to munch down a feast, wanting to know what his final task is, and when a Minotaur suddenly challenges him in an inappropriate building to do it, as I wonder why he wasn't outright told what his final task would be, Hercules is humiliated because he needs ladies like Amy to defeat him. Hercules admits that he had the wrong idea about the girls, and then Amy's horribly written because she somehow doesn't realize that she had achieved his final task for him, when that should have been obvious since it's a freaking Minotaur coming to challenge Hercules out of nowhere. She's not supposed to be that stupid. Then Zeus appears in a golden image and says happily that what Hercules' real test was to recognize women like Techno as his equals. Really? I mean, this is how I'd imagine gods to actually be, instead of being sexist like the mortals who worship them, so I shouldn't be too surprised. So he accepts him into Olympus, and even gives him a golden image makeover to fit in better, I guess. You'd think the gods would get tired of all looking one color and want to differentiate themselves more as individuals, but I guess this is just for show when they're around mortals. The story ends with Amy saying she's developed a taste for the food here. She doesn't realize it's better not to eat the food in past time periods because it probably has more toxins or something than she'd be used to being made in a time before food processing and safety was a thing, where all the bread had mold in it making people hallucinate. In the next story, the freedom fighters and Shortfuse get an alarm call from Kinderbor in their face because his sensors have finally discovered the location of the main Eggman fanboy headquarters. What took him so long? It turns out the Drat base is on an island 10 miles out in the ocean, and Shortfuse says they don't have to wait for Sonic to return to take it out because they should strike hard and fast. It sure is nice of Amy to let Shortfuse help them again after he chose to waste time instead of saving Johnny's life. When they're nearly halfway there, flying to it, conveniently Shortfuse's armor software picks up something. A circuit's cut out from a system crash as the Tornado's engine fails. Tails is smart enough to figure out that Drat must have a force field around the island, blanking out incoming electrical hardware. They decide to retreat reluctantly, which they fortunately can do just fine when the plane was crashing and Shortfuse was falling towards the ocean. They should have all fallen into the ocean, but let's ignore that. After Tails contacts Charmy with a plan to get them to the island, he thinks that if Charmy and him take turns carrying each other across the 10-mile distance, the journey should be fine. So hopefully he can take out the base on his own with Charmy there, and it's a good thing that his friends have faith in him alone to do it. Flying towards the Flickies Island, much like how I would have imagined the flying type team formation in Sonic Advance 3 to actually be, instead of being worse at flying, they fall to the ground, and next thing they know, they're attacking some Eggman fanboys who are wearing high-tech battle armor. Tails briefly flies away, letting them think he's fleeing like a coward, and when he's grabbed and threatened, their weapons all stop working, and so do their battle suits. This is because in the small-looking time he was gone, Tails reversed the polarity on the neutron flow of the control room to make their electrical scrambler face inwards. This means that all of the power on the island is dead. So, are they acknowledging that he's a techno genius now? How did he know to do that? Did he just pull a lever? How would he know that how would he know what that lever did? The story ends with him sailing away on a boat with the evil villains tied up on it. The Eggman fanboys defeated hopefully for good. And the last story is just a reprint. The first story is by Nigel Kitching, and at first I was really annoyed by the random nonsensical concept of a whole universe that has normal civilians, and food and water in it that you access by shrinking to the size of an atom. There's obviously no room for any of that stuff at the quantum level, it's just atoms, and we saw Grimer flying around atoms earlier, which made more sense. We also saw Slimy doing that. So I guess that's what happened to Slimy, but we're never gonna see him in the microverse. But after a random genie knocks Sonic out, he wakes up with Grimer very conveniently when you think the civilians are trying to stop him from reuniting with them. And then it's revealed that Eggman being drained of his emerald power turned him back into the good Kinderbor, and Sonic is happy to see him. It makes sense, but why did he shrink in the first place instead of just turning back to normal, thus becoming normal-sized? The main thing I was feeling in this story was frustration with the civilians for not believing Sonic and antagonizing him. The last two stories are by Lou Stringer. In the second story, Amy and Techno defeat a Minotaur for an offensively portrayed version of Hercules who's just the big eater. Seriously, I don't know what was up with that. And it turns out that him conveniently recognizing their strength as women instead of assuming the Minotaur sucked to be beaten by girls was his final task in the Fleetway comic, letting him be accepted into Olympus because he overcame his mortal society's dumb sexism, which makes much more sense as a final task for him. It's interesting at least, but I could have done without Hercules being portrayed as so laughably oafish. And the final story had the heroes find out that an EMP field surrounds the Drat Island, so Tails has some clever ideas to take turns flying with Charmy to get to the island safely, and then use him as a distraction while he shuts off the power to the island in the control room all by himself. This lets him tie the Eggman fanboys up and bring them home in a boat, which was pretty competent of him.